They came for gold, but found cold, hunger, and war. This isn't a fairy tale. This is how America began. They were met by forests, natives, disease, and broken hopes. They died by the hundreds, but they didn't turn back. Some fled kings, some fled sins, others chased a dream. Their homes were made of mud, their faith of steel. America wasn't born, it was ripped from the earth, in smoke, pain, and blood. The story they won't tell you in school. This is the true face of colonization. Stay with us. You don't yet know how it all began. In the early 17th century, Britain dared to cross the ocean. New lands promised wealth and glory, but no one knew what awaited. This wasn't just an expedition. It was the beginning of one of the most dangerous experiments in the history of the British Empire. In 1607, the first colonists landed in Virginia and established Jamestown. Swamps, mosquitoes, unbearable heat. Half of them died within months. The promised new life turned into hunger, disease, and despair. They met local tribes. At first, cautious peace, but distrust grew. Along with the Europeans came weapons, greed, and foreign diseases. Peace was a fragile illusion, always close to collapse. John Smith took charge. Through diplomacy and force, he managed to save the colony. Legend says Pocahontas saved his life. Maybe myth, maybe truth. But this became a symbol of two worlds colliding. The winter of 1609 became known as the Starving Time. Colonists ate dogs, rats, leather. Some turned to cannibalism. Of 500 settlers, fewer than 100 survived. America began with silence and suffering. New ships brought food and people. Tobacco cultivation began. It became Virginia's gold and the foundation of slavery. The colony prospered, but at a terrible cost. In 1620, the Mayflower arrived with pilgrims seeking religious freedom. They didn't want wealth, only the right to believe. A harsh winter killed many, but their faith remained. A new kind of colony was born, one of spirit. The Wampanoag taught the pilgrims how to farm and fish. A fragile peace was formed. The first Thanksgiving was held, one of the rare moments of harmony in a long and violent history. But peace didn't last. More settlers arrived, tension grew, land became scarce, skirmishes erupted. The dream of freedom turned into a struggle for dominance. Local assemblies appeared, colonists began to govern themselves. Unknowingly, they were building the foundation of American democracy, far from the king's control. Puritans settled in Massachusetts, creating a society based on obedience and faith. Religious laws ruled all. Public punishments maintained order. Fear of dissent shaped their strict world. In 1636, Harvard University was founded. Education became sacred. Reading the Bible was a civic duty. Slowly, ideas of justice and liberty took root through a religious lens. Roger Williams was exiled for advocating freedom of conscience. He founded Rhode Island, a haven for the rejected. There, religious liberty found its first safe harbor. Maryland was created for Catholics, but even here, conflict brewed between faiths. America became a battlefield for Europe's religious tensions. Back in Virginia, tobacco thrived. Labor demands rose. In 1619, the first African slaves arrived. Slavery began not as a system, but as a solution. Eventually, it became America's shadow. A slave was not considered a person, but property. He couldn't file a lawsuit, vote, or escape. He could be sold, punished, or killed. The southern colonies became dependent on slavery. The wealth of Virginia and Carolina was built on the backs of the forgotten. Not all of America followed the same path. In Pennsylvania, the Quakers built a society of peace and equality. They rejected weapons, believed in justice, and opposed slavery. Quiet but firm, they offered a different vision of America's future. As the colonies expanded, land became a battlefield. Agreements with native tribes were ignored. In 1637, the Puritans burned a Pequot village. Hundreds died. Violence, not diplomacy, shaped the American frontier. The surviving tribes retreated. Some sought peace, others planned revenge. Settlers feared the forests, natives feared the towns. Every campfire could be their last. Fear became the foundation of the New World. Despite it all, the colonies grew. Houses multiplied, ports boomed, markets flourished. England supported growth while reaping the profits. America seemed chaotic, but promising. A new nation was forming, though no one realized it yet. Behind the prosperity was tension. In 1675, King Philip's War erupted. Native tribes united. They no longer believed colonial promises. Villages burned, families died. It became one of the bloodiest conflicts in New England's history. Metacom, known as King Philip, fought with desperation. He knew they would likely lose, but it wasn't about winning. It was about dignity, memory, and land. Even in defeat, he became a symbol of resistance. After the war, colonists fortified their towns, built walls, and formed militias. Peace returned, but fear remained. The forest became an enemy, natives a threat. America narrowed its view and rejected what it could not understand. England tightened control. Royal governors were appointed. Taxes and trade restrictions imposed. Colonists grew resentful. They worked, built, and fought, but profits flowed to London. Who really ruled this land? In 1688, the Glorious Revolution shook England. New rulers, new laws. But in America, life was about survival. Colonists began deciding for themselves. Independence took root, not as an ideology, but as habit. In the South, plantations flourished. Trade connected Europe, Africa, and the Indies. Slavery became normal. It paid for luxury. And still, the word freedom echoed, but not for everyone. A new generation emerged in the ports. They didn't remember England. Born in America, they spoke differently, thought differently. To them, this was home. They read newspapers, listened to sermons, debated in taverns. Change was coming. Early social voices emerged. Some called for the end of slavery. Others spoke for women's rights. They were ignored, even mocked, but they existed. America was beginning to ask, what does freedom really mean? By the 1700s, Britain tightened its grip. Trade rules multiplied. Colonies became suppliers, not partners, and people began to ask, why can't we govern ourselves? We build, we pay, we fight, yet have no voice. The ideas of Locke and Montesquieu spread across taverns, schools, and churches. People talked of liberty, natural rights, and justice. Philosophy became necessity. America became a laboratory of new thought. America was changing. In the North, factories rose. In the South, plantations grew. In between, trade cities. Different interests, different cultures, different climates. But the colonies began looking to one another, not to England. The idea emerged, we are not just provinces. Tensions rose between the rich and the poor. Slaveholders tightened control. Farmers struggled under taxes. In 1676, Bacon's Rebellion erupted in Virginia. Rebels burned the Capitol. The uprising was crushed, but the message was clear. America knew how to protest. Protests evolved. Freedom of speech became essential. Newspapers voiced the people's concerns. Editors risked everything. In 1735, the trial of John Peter Zenger marked a turning point. Words gained power. Truth found defenders. Preachers filled the streets. The first Great Awakening had begun. George Whitefield drew thousands. He preached that every soul mattered before God. People cried, repented, felt equal. It was more than religion. It was a spiritual revolution. These ideas challenged the social order. If every soul mattered to God, why not in society? If the soul was free, why not the voice? The revival sparked political awareness. Faith and freedom became intertwined. Meanwhile, Britain fought France. In America, this was the French and Indian War. Colonists became soldiers. They died, endured, and triumphed. But after victory, London demanded payment. Once again, America felt used. New taxes followed. Colonists were outraged. No taxation without representation became their cry. It wasn't just about money, it was about dignity. Why obey laws we didn't help create? Why are we only heard when we pay? Political clubs formed, cartoons mocked power. Farmers, lawyers, merchants, and pastors united in purpose. America began to wake. It wasn't shouting yet, but it had started speaking. While adults debated, the youth felt no connection to Britain. They dressed, spoke, and thought differently. They saw America as home. No longer immigrants, they were Americans. Independence wasn't declared, but it was alive. In 1733, the Sugar Act tightened trade. Merchants lost profit, smuggling flourished. America began to ignore laws it considered unjust. These weren't subjects anymore. They were rebels in training. Each new law weakened British authority. Stamp Act, Quartering Act, colonists felt invaded. No voice, only orders. Boycotts and protests rose. America began to resist. In taverns and workshops, politics ruled the conversation. In Boston, the Sons of Liberty emerged. Their methods were bold: marches, effigies, flags. Freedom moved from theory to action. Ideas spread quickly. Pamphlets, sermons, secret meetings. People felt united. England was far, but here, it was their land, their work, their blood. Why follow a foreign king? Britain responded with troops, streets filled with muskets and fear. Redcoats no longer looked like protectors, they looked like a threat. Tension boiled, revolution was near. Still, many prayed for peace. No one truly wanted war. But each British command felt like a drop into a full glass. America stood on the edge, not of rebellion, but of birth. Something new was coming. In 1770, the Boston Massacre shocked the colonies. British soldiers fired into a crowd. 5 civilians died. Newspapers erupted. Artists drew blood. It wasn't just a clash, it was a spark. America heard the gunshot before the vote. Britain repealed some taxes, hoping to ease the unrest. But in 1773, colonists dumped tea into Boston Harbor. The Boston Tea Party was an open act of defiance. Silence turned to resistance. America found its voice. Britain responded with harsh laws, closing Boston's port, removing local control. Known as the Intolerable Acts, they backfired. The colonies united. The First Continental Congress gathered. For the first time, America spoke with one voice. In 1775, shots rang out at Lexington and Concord. No one knows who fired first, but the war had begun. Settlers became soldiers. America was now more than land. It was identity, courage, and risk. Thomas Paine published Common Sense. He attacked monarchy and called for independence. Written in simple words, read by thousands, it ignited the cause. Ideas turned into movement. Liberty became a goal. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed. Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal." It was a break with empire. Colonies became citizens. A nation was born on paper and in the hearts of people. The war was brutal. Britain had the army, but America had the will. Washington led through hunger and snow. France joined. Each battle risked everything. Hope became a weapon. Freedom, the reward. The Battle of Saratoga changed the war, a major American victory. The world took notice. France believed. America was more than rebellion. It had purpose. That changed everything. 1781, Yorktown. Cannons roared, troops circled. British General Cornwallis surrendered. America won. It was both a moral and military triumph. A nation without an army defeated an empire. Now came the harder part, defining freedom. 1783. The Treaty of Paris ended the war. Britain recognized U.S. independence. Colonies vanished. A country was born. But questions remained. Borders, debt, slavery, power. America stood, uncertain but free. In 1787, a new constitution was written. It wasn't perfect. Slavery remained. Women had no vote. But it declared one bold truth. Power came from the people. It was a beginning, not the end. In 1791, the Bill of Rights was added. Speech, religion, press, assembly. America tried to protect citizens from its own government. These rights, born of suffering, would define the republic's soul. The nation expanded. Settlers pushed west, displacing native tribes. New wars, new deals, new dreams. Colleges rose, roads stretched. America was bold and brutal, proud and flawed. That was its nature. In 1800, Washington became the capital. A new city, a new myth. The capital rose. Founding fathers turned into legends. History became memory. Memory became myth. But shadows remained. Slavery endured. States divided. North versus South. Factions grew. America had defeated an empire. Now it faced itself. Could it survive? Native tribes continued to lose land. Promises were broken. Chief Tecumseh dreamed of unity. His resistance failed, but he became a symbol. America built its future by breaking others. Immigrants arrived, Irish, Germans, Dutch, with hope, hunger, and dreams. America promised freedom, but gave struggle. Ports echoed with new languages. Dreams lived, but not for all. By 1800, America had form. It had science, press, culture. No longer a colony, not yet a power. It was not a victory song, but a search. The idea lived on. Colonization ended, but its marks remained. In laws, in land, in blood. What began with hunger and huts became a nation. America was no longer an experiment. It was a fact. That's the essence. Colonization was more than ships and maps. It was a battle to exist, between fear and faith, power and principle. America wasn't declared, it was discovered, choice by choice.